Bible Worm, reading the Bible with Bible Worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, professor of religious studies at Hendrix College and theologian in residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas.
And I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish, one Christian.
This week we're reading Luke 18:31 to 19:10, the stories of the disciples being unable to comprehend Jesus' impending death and resurrection, a blind man asking Jesus to regain his sight, and Jesus inviting himself to the home of Zacchaeus. Each of these stories, we realize, is about perception, who is able to see correctly and whose vision is blocked. The disciples cannot grasp Jesus' words about his suffering, death, and resurrection, perhaps mercifully so, since seeing clearly what was about to transpire may have been more than they could handle. With some irony, we note that it is the blind man who sees correctly, recognizing Jesus as the Son of David and having the courage to imagine that a new reality is possible for him. And while Zacchaeus famously climbs a sycamore tree to see Jesus, it is the crowd who misperceives Zacchaeus, accusing him of being a sinner when in fact he is living a righteous life. Who is it we misperceive, we wonder, and how might we be bold enough to imagine a new reality? Hey, Amy, it's Bible Worm time.
Hello, Bobby.
We are making our way rapidly through the Gospel of Luke and almost getting to Holy Week. We've got this one, and then next week is our Palm Sunday episode.
Oh, that's coming right up.
It has kind of flown by a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just like time keeps moving. Time keeps on slipping into the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. That's true.
All right, but today is the day on which we are. And so let us do the podcast that we are doing.
Yes.
Which is for this day, which is Luke chapter 18, verse 31 through 19, verse 10. This picks up about a chapter and a half after our last episode, which was about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And so what do we need to know to get us ready for this text today? Is there anything we should talk about?
Anything we should talk about? Well, we have skipped a couple of stories, and I was, other than, I don't want to summarize all the stories for you, but I was trying to look at sort of overall themes. There are a couple of stories that I would say sort of, have like a group of people and are pointing out how within that group, some people behave in a way that demonstrates faith and some people behave in a way that's more about like, they do try to do the right thing. It's not that they don't care, but then once they feel they've done the right thing, they're just real comfortable with themselves.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
And that's not a preferred disposition.
So the way you said that reminds me a little bit of our conversation about the Good Samaritan a few weeks ago, where we talked about how he was looking for a checklist of things to do before he could go to heaven, and Jesus was giving him a way to live a life. And there's that little tension in there. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yeah, I think so. That you feel like there are things you're supposed to do and you do them, and then you feel good instead of having this orientation towards like, I know that I need God's mercy.
Yeah.
There's one story in particular that is famous, and we're not reading it in this year's cycle, so I will summarize the story for you. There is a ruler or a rich man who asks Jesus what he has to do to inherit eternal life. And Jesus gives him what I would call like, the big commandments,
right.
Don't murder, no adultery, things that, okay, fine. And he is good on all those fronts. So it seems like he has checked the boxes. And then Jesus tells him to give away everything he owns.
Yeah.
And that makes him sad.
Yes, it would make you sad.
Yeah, that's a different kind of ask and not one that he was expecting. And Jesus remarks how difficult it is for someone to get into the kingdom of heaven once they have wealth, how difficult it is for a rich person. And I imagine that's because it's so hard to give it away once you have it.
Yes.
And so after this story, that one of the disciples, I think Peter, says like, well, we gave up all our stuff, which, don't say you're checking the boxes, Peter. That's not what we're doing here. But Jesus assures his disciples that, basically the more you are willing to give up in your life on this world, the more likely you are to inherit eternal life, or the better things will be for you in the world to come, or however.
It's so interesting, Jesus' response there. I think we talked about maybe Mark's version of this story last year, I think. But Jesus' response there is, you will receive many times more in this age in eternal life and the life to come. And so there really is this sense of like, if you give it away, it will come back to you. It might not come back to you in the same way. And I think what he means is like, you will have this whole like communal existence of people and things, farms, houses that are not yours, but they belong to the collective. And so you actually will become richer if you enter into this sort of shared space. And then also that will extend into the kingdom of heaven.
Thank you for that important nuance.
So we're picking up today in chapter 18, verse 31. And we've really got sort of three discrete texts today. One is a prediction of the death and resurrection. One is a healing of a blind man. And then third is a famous story that's also a famous children's song that I think I sang for you a little bit last time, which is the story of Zacchaeus.
The wee little man.
A wee little man was he. All right, so I'll pick up in chapter 18, verse 31, and I'm reading the Common English Bible. Jesus took the 12 aside and said, "Look, we're going up to Jerusalem, and everything written about the human one by the prophets will be accomplished. He will be handed over to the Gentiles. He will be ridiculed, mistreated, and spit on. After torturing him, they will kill him. On the third day, he will rise up." But the 12 understood none of these words. The meaning of this message was hidden from them, and they didn't grasp what he was saying. So Jesus has been predicting his passion along the way. This is kind of the most detailed version of it. And they are getting pretty close to Jerusalem. They've been journeying toward Jerusalem since chapter 9. I think it's 9:51. And so things are getting kind of real. Jesus is fairly descriptive about it here, like what's about to happen. So I'm just curious, like when you read that he will be handed over, ridiculed, and so on, like what did you notice in those details that engaged you?
I mean, what I notice in the details that I'm sure this is not a particularly insightful or like new insight into this text, but is that the degradation that precedes the physical abuse.
Yes.
This sort of dehumanization
Yeah.
that comes just with words first, just like mocking and insults, and then spitting, like it just, the progression of it that ultimately leads to killing. And I don't know, the ways in which that pattern plays out so often in the world that we know also.
Yes.
But it makes the description hurt so much more to read than if it had just said he will be handed over to the Gentiles and killed.
Yeah, Jesus has said that sort of version of it previously, and here he's adding these details about the mocking and the ridicule. I think you're right about that. And the Romans actually did practice crucifixion this way, where it wasn't simply like crucifying somebody, but there was often this sort of ridicule, shaming, torture, abuse that came before, because the crucifixion wasn't simply about getting, rid of the problem person. It was about, on the one hand, it was about like really showing them what's what and who's in charge.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it was showing other people like, hey, like this, what's happening to him right now, this could also happen to you. So this is a warning. It's not just like a quick and painless death. It's this prolonged kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is interesting to me, at least, that Jesus just says, I will be handed over to the Gentiles. He doesn't mention Herod or the scribes or the Pharisees. Gentiles, I take it as just a reference to the Romans. So it seems like he's putting it on Rome specifically in a different kind of way than I was maybe expecting. Did you notice that?
I did notice that. And, it came together. The thing that most stood out to me, I think, in this passage, and maybe reading it as a Jew, is that all of this is preceded by the phrase, everything that was written by the prophets will happen. Because, of course, the prophets are my text too. Right. And I'm like, well, I don't remember that part of the prophets.
Yeah.
And so I say that in particular in relationship to being handed over to the Gentiles, because some of the texts that I think they're referring to from the prophets, like Isaiah 53, that has this sort of like suffering servant that is so hotly debated across history and across different populations within the Jewish community and in the Christian community. Who are we talking about here? But one that is well established within the Jewish community is that it is the suffering servant is the people of Israel that is suffering at the hands of the Babylonians. Like that there is this sort of Gentile population that is causing harm to Israel.
Yeah.
And so I saw that sort of connection there by calling out the Gentiles in particular.
That's really nice. Luke does not make clear here what prophets he's referring to, but I think that passage you're referring to in Isaiah 52:13 to 53:12, the suffering servant, I think that's clear. I mean, that's got to be one of the ones
it's got to be in there
about, for sure. And of course, Christians read that text as being about Jesus.
Yeah.
And the sort of vicarious suffering that Jesus undergoes. And in your tradition, the vicarious suffering that the Jewish people undergo sort of on behalf. It's interesting because it's both because of the nations, like the empire, and also in a way it's sort of understood as like, it also has positive effect on the nations because the nations look around and they see what has happened to Israel or the Jewish people, or in this case to Jesus, and it makes them repent and want to come to the God who like restores life after this kind of abuse. And so it's both like the empire is doing it, and also it's what ultimately is gonna subvert the empire.
Yeah.
Jesus says this right after, like, there's this whole thing about following Jesus, and like, if you follow me, it's going to turn out really great for you. Like, you're going to have all the stuff in this world, and in the next one, and then it's like, by the way,
here's
like,
what I mean by great.
Yeah, here's the fine print. Like,
let's redefine terms.
They're signing their waiver before they go into the following of Jesus, and so like, this would be kind of shocking, wouldn't you? I mean, they've been following Jesus. They've heard some things from Jesus, but this seems like, you've got the waiver. You're on the back of the horse at the whatever. I don't even know what I'm thinking. It's like when you go rafting. Although rafting is fun, and this is not fun. But you're going on this big trip.
I don't like rafting, so it can be rafting.
By the way, this is going to be great, and you might die. Can you sign this little thing? And you're like, like in the abstract, I'm always like, of course I can sign the thing. But when I'm sitting there on my raft, my little helmet, and they hand me the waiver, I'm always like, in the moment, it feels scarier.
I wonder if that's part of what is like this phrase, what he said was hidden from them.
Yeah.
I mean, well, first of all, I'm just really interested and curious about the use of the passive voice there. Like before it was sort of, I always took it as sort of like they couldn't understand. They didn't understand it. And here now it's like, was the print too small? Like, like, was this just something that you can say it to someone as many times as you want, and they're just not going to be able to hold on to this?
That's kind of the way that I have tended to read it, is like, it's just a cognitive break. Like, you have been told something that you have no way of processing. If you could process it, you probably would run away, as they're going to do later a little bit.
Right.
And so they just can't take it on board.
Yeah.
Another way of reading it, which may be related, is that what Jesus is really saying cannot be understood until the resurrection has occurred, then you can look back on it and say like, oh, that's
Yes.
what was happening.
Yes.
But the characters in the story can't do that because they haven't yet seen the resurrection.
Yeah.
So a modern reader might be able to see what's happening, but
Yes.
you wouldn't expect that Peter and his friends could quite get there.
Bobby, have you considered the reading, or what do you think about this reading? That it, putting it in the passive, what he said was hidden from them,
Yeah.
that it was like intentionally hidden from them.
Yeah.
Like God hid it from them, or like sort of knowing, as you said, that like if you actually understood what he was saying, you would not go along with this.
Yeah.
You would fight it. You would run away. All the reasons that Jesus is pretty secretive about what's going to happen in the beginning of the story. Or do you tend to read it more just as like, this is human capacity and we actually have this safety measure in our own systems?
I think I more quickly gravitate toward this is just the way humans work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you say it that way, it's just reminding me, and this may be what you have in mind, of God hardening Pharaoh's heart in the book of Exodus to make things play out the way God wants them to. Like just because we sort of have evidence of God in the biblical text having manipulated people's internal processes in order to achieve some sort of an outcome.
Yeah, a really like big outcome
Yes.
that needs to be big, not for the sake of drama, but so that people will remember and keep referring back to it through all these generations.
Right.
You don't want it to just work out easily.
I like that way of reading it, as God has sort of like prevented them from thinking all the way through it, because if they thought all the way through it, they couldn't handle it. And it turns out that they do handle what they need to do.
Yeah.
It's a little bumpy, as we'll see in the next couple of weeks, but they make it through, and then they go, and in Luke's telling in the book of Acts, they proclaim the gospel to the world.
Yeah.
And so I like that. Like God gave them a little safety mechanism here that protected them a little bit. I like that, because I tend to kind of shame them a little bit. Of like they like, come on, guys, you
Get
should get
with
this.
it.
Yeah. But I like that. Like, you don't want to get this. You just want to like
all in good time.
keep following and don't process it too well.
Yeah. Hi, y'all. It's Amy, one of your friendly co-hosts, and I want to tell you why Bible Worm is important to me. There's a Jewish tradition that Torah study is best done with a partner, a Hevruta, we call it, someone who pushes you beyond where you would have gone on your own. Bobby was essentially my Hevruta for 10 years of grad school, and I've never found a thought partner quite like him. So when he asked if I wanted to read text together, there was no real thought process before I said yes. The decision to record this podcast the way we do was risky. We don't have a script. We don't pre-talk things. We are thinking together live. And it is my hope that precisely because of that, you feel invited to think along with us. Because everyone needs a Hevruta. And if you don't have one, I hope you will let us be yours. If this way of being in relationship to biblical text speaks to you the way it speaks to me, I hope you'll help sustain us through Patreon at whatever level makes sense for you. There are some nice perks if you need them. Liturgies, videos, monthly discussion groups. This year I've added some recordings of the chanting of these texts that you might hear in a synagogue. Or you can just support us to show your appreciation and help us know that this work matters. Thanks for listening and for supporting us however you can.
So immediately after that, we transition to the story of the blind man. And Jesus now with his disciples is about to come into Jericho, which is, we talked about a few weeks ago, is just down at the bottom of the hill from Jerusalem. So this is like the last kind of stop on the way to Jerusalem. So here's the text beginning in verse 35. As Jesus came to Jericho, a certain blind man was sitting beside the road begging. When the man heard the crowd passing by, he asked what was happening. They told him, Jesus the Nazarene is passing by. The blind man shouted, Jesus, Son of David, show me mercy. Those leading the procession scolded him, telling him to be quiet. But he shouted even louder, "Son of David, show me mercy." Jesus stopped and called for the man to be brought to him. When he was present, Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" He said, "Lord, I want to see." Jesus said to him, "Receive your sight. Your faith has healed you." At once he was able to see, and he began to follow Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they praised God too. You know, in the Matthew and Mark, this guy's name is Bartimaeus, and Mark clarifies it's Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, which always makes me laugh because, as you well know, Bartimaeus just means son of Timaeus. So they're like, this is son of Timaeus. Who is the son of Timaeus? So I think I like to imagine Luke sort of reading Mark's gospel and rolling his eyes a little bit. Like come on, Mark.
It's just a blind guy, okay?
And so he just leaves the whole thing.
That's funny.
So he's sitting beside the road and he asks the crowd what was happening. And their response is Jesus the Nazarene is passing by. That Jesus the Nazarene, it's sort of strange to me. What do you make of that as the crowd's kind of definition about who this person is?
That's so interesting. That's a really interesting question because clearly he has a following now. Like he has a crowd passing with him that is enough that someone who is blind can tell something is happening.
Right. Yes.
But the Nazarene isn't a particularly it's just very practical explanation. It doesn't say anything about what they believe about him.
Right.
So I don't know. Do you think they're like kicking the can down the road and just not making a claim one way or the other? Or this is a follow-up question related.
Okay.
It says in my translation, the NRSV, after he asks, they told him, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the Nazarene is passing by. Who do you think told him? People in the crowd?
Oh.
Or people who were also sitting around and watching the crowd?
Like people who had been along with Jesus for the whole time, or people who were just like in Jericho?
Because it seems like the people who were with him the whole time might really have a different answer.
Yeah. That's a good question, Amy. On your first point about Jesus the Nazarene, like I read that as just sort of like Bobby the Arkansan. Like it's a very like humdrummy kind of way of describing him. Like it's just his name and where he's from.
Yeah.
And so like you know him, but it's not like it gives him no like...
It makes no claim about him.
Right.
It's just...
Not even like the healer or the
prophet,
anything about
the teacher, nothing. It's just
where he's from. It's very humdrummy. I like your other question about like, who do we mean by they? I had sort of read this as like, you know, it's like Taylor Swift is coming into town and people start to gather around and like, you know, see like her tour bus and they're like, who's that? Who's that? And so I have read this as the people sort of along the way in Jericho who were like, oh, there's a rock star coming into town. And so they know enough to know who he is, but they don't have this kind of framework yet.
But they're not like following him around on tour.
It really changes things if it's the people following him around on tour who say that.
Yeah, I feel like they should have a different title for him.
I would think they would by now, but I don't really know. The man gets further than Jesus the Nazarene.
Sure does.
Calling him Jesus, son of David. Within the request, show me mercy. Jesus, son of David is...
That's a power reference, man.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you read that son of David?
I mean, it's not like David was his father. You know, there's no reason to be referencing the particular ancestor David unless you are trying to evoke the Davidic lineage, and I would say suggest that he might be the Messiah. Yeah. Now, by Messiah, I don't necessarily mean the kind of Messiah Jesus turns out to be in this story.
Right.
But, you know, there's a clear Hebrew Bible understanding that there will be someone in the lineage of David who is going to come up and be able to save the people in I think, a more like sort of political, you know, way that we've talked about before. But I think it's a real recognition of the power that Jesus may have.
I think that's exactly right. I think it's a power reference. I think it's a messianic reference. I think it is a recognition that in some way this guy is changing things. I think you are also right that he probably doesn't actually have in mind what Jesus is actually going to do, the way in which Jesus turns out to be the Messiah, because nobody really got that. But he's sort of gotten past where, this crowd says Jesus the Nazarene. David, by the way, has no connection to Nazareth. Right, whatsoever. If they said Jesus from Bethlehem, then you might think like, oh, son of David, like makes sense. But so this guy gets there. One of the things that's interesting here is this is the first time anybody, including Luke, refers to Jesus as the son of David in Luke's gospel. We've had it, suggested kind of along the way in the birth narrative and elsewhere, but that title has never been applied to him until right here. He's the only one in the gospel of Luke who does it. I just think that's so, it's so interesting that here you have a man who physically cannot see, who is actually able to see more deeply into the figure that has arrived than the people who are crowded around.
And who knows enough about Jesus at this point to be able to hear Jesus of Nazareth, know who they're talking about, and know that he is in the Davidic lineage, and know what that means. Yeah.
Thank you for putting that way. I was making those connections kind of casually in my own head, and you put a fine point on it. And it makes me wonder, how did he know? Yeah. Is there a network of people who have been healed, who talk to other people who, are needing healing, or does he just have some kind of spiritual insight?
I don't imagine he's in at the power tables.
Right, sure.
But he knows.
One of the interesting themes that kind of plays in this set of texts today is, if you think of seeing as metaphorical for understanding something about Jesus, then we just had the disciples who were unable to perceive what was real, or it was blocked for them. They didn't understand what was happening. And then now here we have the crowd saying Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus the Nazarene. And so they don't quite see it yet. But then here's this man who physically can't see, who has this insight that is lacking among everyone else. What the blind man asks for is mercy. Show me mercy. I'm just curious, do you have a sense when in your reading just what you think he might be asking for at this moment? Do you know what I mean? What's he hoping Jesus is going to do for him?
It's a really good question. It's hard because I think I read it too fast. Before I sort of pausing there. I guess a cry for mercy makes me think in some way ease the path that I am on. What is your I really wish this were in Hebrew, Bobby. What is your what is I don't know if the Greek is any help to you, but what is your read of the word mercy there?
Yeah, I mean mercy, so the Greek is eleos, which is the same word that was used in the Good Samaritan text about, go show him, the one who showed him mercy, that's the same term. I think it can cover a wide range of territory. And so I think it could be anything from he's asking to receive his sight back, that's the ultimate form of mercy, to could you spare a quarter, could you just show me a kindness? The way that I have tended to read this, but I don't know for sure why I read it this way, is that at this moment, he's just asking for whatever you can spare. People ask me for this all the time, just walking around Little Rock. I know the same is true in Atlanta and probably most places, where people will just say, do you have any spare change? Or can you, whatever you can offer me is appreciated. I have tended to read him that way a little bit, maybe he asks for mercy, not just from Jesus, but maybe he says this to lots of folks. And maybe because he has said son of David, maybe he has some higher hopes, but he's made I think you could read it as a fairly small ask here. So we're told that the way that the CEB has it is those leading the procession scolded him. Does the NRSV have something similar?
Those who were in front sternly ordered him to be
Yeah,
quiet.
so there's sort of like, it literally says those who were in front.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, you could read it as like the people standing in front of him,
Mm-hmm.
or you could read it sort of like you were sort of pressing on earlier, which is to say those in the front of the processional, that is the people who were already with Jesus when he started out,
Mm-hmm.
scolded him. So I guess I have a twofold question. You can address it how you want. One is, who do you think is scolding him? And the second is, why do you think they're scolding him?
I mean, I think I read the why as maybe the way I read the why informs how I think of the who. But I read the why as sort of, this is a man to be honored, and it is somehow he's above these
Yes.
little outcries for individual attention. Like, he's above this interaction. And it is somehow like dishonoring to him to mire him down in such a thing.
Yeah.
For some reason, I read it as people who were gathered round but not traveling with Jesus.
Yes.
And I guess I sort of picture in my head, okay, I'm picturing the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. That's what I'm picturing.
Yeah.
So I went to this parade once when I was a little kid, and my mom sat me and my older sister down on the sidewalk and put a younger sister in each of our laps and like buckled our arms like a little seatbelt around our younger sister and just said, don't move and don't let go of your sister. And then as you do that, like if you really are kind of understand yourself not to be able to move around, that maybe someone without sight would sort of feel that way in a crowd. I don't know. People eventually just sort of file in front of you. Like people keep shoving closer and closer. And so what I'm picturing is that the people who have gotten closer and closer are telling this man who is behind them to be quiet.
I like that reading of it. I think that's probably my most natural reading of it as well. And so what you said about why was this is like embarrassing or like don't bother, like you're not the sort of person.
That's not what's happening here. This is a ceremony. It's a parade. It's I don't know, like an honored person is processing down the street. Like this is not the time to beg for things.
Yeah. I mean, I know lots of people who beg for things, and this is the way that they would be treated, right? If a dignitary were coming into town and they were begging, especially if they were begging the dignified person for mercy, it would absolutely be, and I mean, I might be one of them, just to be perfectly honest with you, like shutting people down and saying like, hey, now's not the time, or like, let's don't bother the person.
Yeah, let's don't bother them. That's right. Mm-hmm.
I think that's also my natural reading of it. It's interesting to me to play with the idea that it's actually the ones in the front of the party, like the processional.
Yeah.
And like you were sort of suggesting earlier in this text, that we do have the disciples occasionally in the gospel saying things like keep those kids away from Jesus, or, like we have seen them with this, like, don't bother the teacher. In Matthew's gospel, there's a story of a woman who is trying to get to Jesus and the disciples kind of shoo her away. And so you could read this as Jesus has just told him he's going to Jerusalem. He's like steeled his jaw, like he's facing torture and mockery and execution. And they could just be saying this guy's got other things on his mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't bother the teacher with this.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessary. It's definitely not necessary to read the text that way. I think it's possible to read the text that way. And you might unpack some things about, what it means to try to protect Jesus from people in need or something like that. Jesus, so the man shouts again and even louder.
He shouts again and he holds on to the Son of David over Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. And Jesus, it catches Jesus's attention. And I wonder with Jesus, to what extent is it that the man's just loud? To what extent is it that Jesus is oriented to find people who need mercy and address them? Or to what extent it's the naming of him as Son of David?
Yes.
Do you have thoughts about any of that?
I don't have very smart thoughts. I think what what struck me was sort of, as you just said, like he has like set his face to Jerusalem and he is getting close. And something has happened here that merits stopping.
Yes.
And a lot of things have happened on the way that he's been like, no, let's not get distracted by this thing where,
Yes.
So there's something real here. So I don't know if it's the fact that this person recognizes him as son of David, or if in this, the kind of honor, the form of honor that's being given to him feels somehow not quite exactly like the kind of honor he wants. And so it feels good to have someone ask for the kind of thing that actually, this is really what I'm much more interested in than being the head of a parade.
I like that a lot, Amy.
Why do you think he stops?
I don't really know, but I like that way of thinking about it. I mean, it's useful to me to think like Jesus is just the kind of person who stops for people who need mercy.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus has encountered a lot of people who need mercy in his short ministry. And he stopped for some of them, but he hasn't stopped for all of them because it's sort of an overwhelming task.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like the idea that there's something about what this man has said, son of David. I like your interpretation of Jesus hears something that's different. He hears something that is true.
Mm-hmm.
He hears something that he's been looking for somebody who could name him this way. I like that a lot. The flip side of that is that the man has the courage to keep calling to Jesus and in a way that nobody else is calling him.
Yes.
And so there's just something in him that's like, I'm going to speak my truth, man. Like, I'm going to say what I think's true, even though y'all aren't saying it. And I'm going to keep saying it, even though y'all are trying to shut me down. Like, I just like this guy, like his self-confidence a little bit, his like perception of deeper truths and his willingness to speak even when the crowd is going against him. I just like, I like this guy. I think he's got some
fire.
Gumption is the word I was going for.
Oh, gumption. Yeah.
Fire is a lot better. Gumption always reminds me of gumbo. And then I think about Forrest Gump. And
I was thinking of Forrest Gump too, but I didn't go through gumbo to get there.
Maybe I went through Forrest Gump to get to gumbo, because there's a whole thing about gumbo in
There's
Forrest
a whole
Gump.
thing about gumbo in there, yeah.
But there's not gumbo in this text, so far as we know.
Bobby, I have a question that's just a little bit later in the story, but it impacts the way that I read his gumption.
Okay.
So in the translation of my text, this is different than what you read. When Jesus asks, what do you want? He says, let me see again. And yours just said, let me see, or something like that.
So Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? And in the CEB, he says, Lord, I want to see. Period. In yours, he says, Lord, I want to see again.
Yes, let me see again.
That's so interesting, Amy. I don't really know how the NRSV got to that translation. I'd have to do a little digging around about that. But the NRSV is not known for just sticking words in places. So I'm curious. I'm curious when you read it as again.
Yeah.
Like, where does that, like, what difference does it make to you?
Yeah. I mean, maybe because we are somewhat freshly off stories of like the prodigal son and the lost sheep and the lost coin. Like I have on my mind what it feels like to have something and then lose it.
Yes.
As opposed to just not have it from the beginning. And so I feel like that's part of how I understand his, like the passion of his, well, that's a confusing word to use in this context, that his impassioned plea that he knows what it is to see. He knows what is missing. And so there's nothing at stake for the people shushing him. Like, but he knows what's possible, and he like longs for it. He cries out for it. But I hang all that on the word again. So,
well, I mean, so I think no matter how you were to read the Greek, thinking about again, I think is perfectly reasonable, because there's nothing in the text that says he's been blind since birth or anything like that, which the Gospels often will do. And so I think whatever we make of the Greek, I think to say, what if this guy has been sighted and then became blind and now wants to see again? I think that's a totally reasonable and insightful interpretation of that. And it connects it to those other stories, the lost and found stories, in a really interesting way. I like that.
Mm.
I've always appreciated that Jesus asks him, what do you want me to do for you? Instead of just doing a thing. Like, I don't know what Jesus would have done. Like, maybe this is what Jesus would have done anyway. But it's interesting that he asks. Did you have any thoughts about that?
I definitely had a thought about the question. Yes, that it's just such a straightforward, I guess I just make it so much more complicated in my head. Either they have to have this whole pastoral conversation about like, what is the nature of your suffering?
Right.
Or, you know, or that Jesus just knows what he needs, or that like, it's really, I mean, it's so straightforward. It almost feels like transactional. And I say that mostly as a check on myself because I'm always feel so cautious of things in the world of faith that feel transactional. But clearly this is not a bad thing that's happening in this text.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just the stripped down simplicity of it is really striking to me. He just asks and the man just says.
Yeah.
Like there's no flowery stuff happening here.
I like that simplicity, and I like that you captured both sides of it. So Jesus does not assume that he knows what the man truly wants. Mm-hmm. So he asks, like, this is really lovely. Instead of like a transactional thing in which the person with the stuff to offer just gives whatever they think is needed, to ask, what do you need? I think is really it's lovely. And then I have always appreciated this man who, like, it's kind of a big thing to say, I want to see again. Yeah. You know, like, maybe you've asked for this before and been disappointed, or maybe you don't think that's possible, or maybe you think you're asking too much and you should ask for something smaller, like, can I have a quarter? And so I've always just appreciated that he says what he wants, you know, like, let's just name it.
Yeah.
And
don't overthink it.
And this guy's sort of like courage has always been really impressive to me. The way Jesus responds is, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. And so I'm just always interested in that faith. So, I mean, Jesus heals him, right? You know, but Jesus says it's your faith that has healed you. And I don't know what there is to say about that, but is there anything you want to say about that?
I mean, if he didn't think this were possible, I don't think he would have. It's like his persistence. But what gives you the I don't know, like energy to be so persistent in asking is the faith that it's possible. If you don't actually think it's possible, save your breath, you know?
Yeah.
And he clearly was on fire with this possibility. So in a sense, it was his faith that saved him.
I like thinking about it that way, that these sort of miraculous things, or these sort of like being able to see the truth, or however you want to talk about it, is like there's a chemistry between the person who is asking and Jesus who is granting. And it requires both of those things at some level. Mm-hmm. So the man falls in line behind Jesus and he's following him. I mean, I don't know if he knows what he's getting into, but he doesn't really ask. He's just like, I'm going to join the processional. And then off we go to Jerusalem. And his sort of courage there also results in lots of people praising God.
Yes.
It's beautiful. So the next story is the story of Zacchaeus, which is in chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through town. A man there named Zacchaeus, a ruler among tax collectors, was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he couldn't because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to that spot, he looked up and said, Zacchaeus, come down at once. I must stay in your home today. So Zacchaeus came down at once, happy to welcome Jesus. Everyone who saw this grumbled, saying, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone, I repay them 4 times as much. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this household, because he too is the son of Abraham. The human one came to seek and save the lost. So we get a couple of details about Zacchaeus. The first is that the CEB has it as a ruler among tax collectors. How does the NRSV have it?
He was a chief tax collector, but I thought a ruler among tax collectors was very funny.
Yeah.
I rule the tax collectors.
I rule the tax collectors. My assumption about that is, I mean, the way that it's often understood is that, like, you know, we've talked about this before. Tax collectors were really kind of like toll booth operators. Mm-hmm. Joel Green, whose commentary I read sometimes, just calls them toll collectors. And your average toll collector sort of works for the person in charge. And Zacchaeus seems to be the person in charge. Mm-hmm. And so he's probably the one who has contracted with Rome to collect these tolls. He's probably the one who has everybody working for him. He's probably the one that takes most of the excess that has been gathered. He is not probably very well liked. Do you have any thoughts about the nature of tax collectors in this period or in this culture?
I mean, it seems like they're not very well liked.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you like a tax collector?
I mean, I can't imagine why.
Get my head around that.
I know. And I don't know if it's that people feel like the tax system's not fair. And so the people who are enforcing it, they sort of hold them responsible, even the ones who don't have that much power and are just, like nobody likes that. And it's interesting now that this guy is one of the more powerful among them, which on the one hand gives him certain power, like he's rich.
Yes.
And on the other hand, gives him less power because nobody likes him.
Right. The poor guy. Yeah.
I am used to, in today's world, like when people are rich, people often like them or at least pretend to like them.
Yeah.
Because they're rich. And that's what we unfortunately like money.
You know, tax collectors were seen they were seen disfavorably, not just in Jewish culture in the first century, but really in Roman culture. Like they were just kind of disliked in the way that probably tax agents are maybe disliked today, or even like seeing the sort of destruction of the federal workforce that is happening in the US right now. And people are like, yeah, get rid of those government employees. Like a little bit that way, you know, like, I don't know, like, wouldn't it be better if we just didn't have people collecting taxes? Which I mean, maybe it would, but also like the emperor's highways are, you know, kind of nice.
I mean, I feel like it's also a way that I hear people talk about lawyers now. Like, no one likes a lawyer because they're just going to argue and be all litigious until you need a lawyer. And then, you know, like they are an emblem of the society in which they live, in which we all participate.
Yeah.
But there's a tension there. Yeah.
Yeah. The other detail we get about Zacchaeus is that he's short. And so I don't know if there's anything to say about short, but do you have thoughts about short? I say this as a short person. Yeah,
I mean, no, it seems like kind of a funny detail. Yeah. In my mind, I don't know how accurate this is. I will tell you, you know, in modern times, the typical Jewish man is not a tall man. In my mind, a Roman man is a tall man, but that's mostly from like movies. So I don't know if that's actually true. I have not made a whole lot in my mind about the fact that he's short, other than it winds up having him up a tree, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think he is short enough relative to the other people that he's around.
He's unusually short.
He's unusually short. He can't make his way in, like he can't just peer over the crowd or like stand on his tiptoes or something. Yeah. Like he is smaller than the folks around. Yeah, I had never run across this before, but when I was preparing for today, one of my commentaries was saying that the word that's used there for short actually might not be about shortness, but about his age, which I thought, like, he is small in stature, which I thought was just kind of interesting, that he might be a young, rich guy. And I don't quite know where to go with that or how much I want to follow that, because I've always sung that song, Zacchaeus was a wee little man. And so it's like, it messes up the song when he's a young man. And if you read it that way, then what's happening is people are like blocking him kind of intentionally, because he's like a young punk who made a lot of money off of them. And it sort of changes things for me. And I don't know in quite what way, but it changes things for sure. So he climbs up the sycamore tree, and you were making some comments about the climbing of the sycamore tree. What did you think about that?
I mean, okay, on the one hand, it's just a comical image to me. So I don't know if it's supposed to be comical, but it is to
I
me.
think it's supposed to be, yeah.
But on the other hand, I feel like it is so like paradigmatically the periphery of the scene.
Yes.
Like he's not close enough that he can just see. He's not even on the plane where you'd expect Jesus's eyes to be. Like he's on a different, it's a way for him to see without being part of what's happening.
I think the climbing of the sycamore tree, I think it is probably funny, and I think it is probably also like lacking in dignity.
Yeah,
so this
that sounds
person
right.
who is kind of small and nobody likes him, now he's had to climb up a tree. And so I think there's a little bit of a like, haha, tax collector Zacchaeus had to climb a sycamore tree, you know.
I wonder if he feels self-conscious about that. The text doesn't say anything.
It doesn't say. My reading of it is that he should feel self-conscious about it. Like people are probably making fun of him about it. But whether he is aware of that or cares about that is less clear. Like he really wants to see Jesus. And so like, you know, I mean, the one way to read it is just like, he doesn't really care what kind of indignity he has to undergo because he really wants to see Jesus. Do you have any thoughts about why he wants to see Jesus so much?
I mean, it could just be there's a celebrity passing through town. I don't know. I just have this idea of him as like really being sort of on the periphery of the social world in some way. And you know, they didn't have TV. You couldn't just watch these things on TV and feel like you were a part of something.
Yeah.
And so I guess I sort of see it that way a little bit. It's so interesting to think of him being rich and powerful in that way, but also such a sort of pariah socially.
That is interesting. And I'm trying to think of like parallels. And I mean, I'm sure there are, but as you said, in our society, it seems like if you have money, you can kind of buy your way into at least appearing to have
people
friends.
Pretend to like you. Yeah.
Now, he climbs up the tree to see Jesus, but the way the text seems to go, Jesus is the one who sees him.
Yeah.
And you were sort of talking about Zacchaeus being on the periphery and maybe kind of on the edge of the scene and out of the way. So why do you think Jesus notices him in particular?
I mean, Jesus does look to the periphery, like metaphorically and also actually in this story.
Yeah.
I imagine it was, once it catches your eye that there's a dude who climbed a tree, like, that's different than he has set himself apart in that way.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like we're not told that Zacchaeus is saying anything like, hey, look up here.
Yeah, that's right.
And so in the previous text, Jesus noticed somebody because they were loud.
That's right.
Here, Jesus notices because he's in a tree. And I just kind of like to think of Jesus as the kind of guy who walked around looking up in trees to see if anybody, like, where's the weird guy in the crowd that needs somebody to be nice to him? Like, maybe that's how you would read it here. Whatever the case, he says, I must stay in your home today. So he invites himself over for dinner, which Zacchaeus, I mean, to me, that's kind of like, I would be so embarrassed to invite myself over to dinner, but Jesus just goes for it. And Zacchaeus is excited about it.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that interaction, how you read it?
My translation was slightly different than yours. Not substantively, but mine felt a little more friendly to me. It's Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today.
Yeah.
I just read it as like, I'm excited to see you in particular, Zacchaeus, in this whole crowd of people. And it sort of immediately gives him a job. It gives him a place in this world that he has sort of just been like observing from the top of a tree. I think it's very sweet.
It is very sweet. Why do you think Jesus knows Zacchaeus' name?
Oh, that never crossed my mind. Jesus is not Santa, so I can't go that.
I mean, he is Jesus, though. And like Jesus knows some things. Jesus sometimes reads people's minds. You know, we've seen that a number of times. So it could be that Jesus is just insightful that way.
I mean, do you think people complained about him?
It could be he's heard people complaining about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus has a little bit of a reputation around the town.
Yeah.
people talk about him as a sinner here in a minute. And so maybe Jesus seems to pay attention to people who have that kind of reputation.
It's like the opposite Santa list. He has the list of the sinners.
Exactly. He has the naughty list and he brings them gifts. Yeah. I think it is possible, although this is a little bit of a push, to say that Jesus actually already knows Zacchaeus in the same way that we sort of talked about Jesus also knowing the woman who anointed his feet with oil a couple of weeks back. Joel Green, who read that text that way, also reads this text that way, that they had a prior relationship. I don't know what we're going to want to think about that, but the fact that Jesus knows his name is at least notable in some way.
Yeah.
The people grumble, saying that Zacchaeus is a sinner. We've seen people grumbling throughout this gospel, but usually they've been Pharisees.
Yeah.
Here it seems to be just like everybody. And the CEB has everyone who saw, which would include like not just the people of the town, but I don't know, maybe also the disciples and followers of Jesus. I don't quite know how big you want to make the grumble. Do you have thoughts about who's grumbling and why?
I mean, it's interesting. Once you expand it beyond the Pharisees, who, as they're portrayed in the Gospels, are really, very attentive to the lists of things you are and are not supposed to be doing, I read this more like they're sort of rolling their eyes and be like, he's going to eat with that jerk. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Not like sinner in the sense of, I don't know, such sort of religious terms, but just why did
like a social outcast.
A social outcast who like why would you pick him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's so interesting because like I notice this with my students when I read the Gospels, that they are often very hard on the Pharisees. Like, oh, the Pharisees are always grumbling about something. And then here it's everybody's grumbling. And so you ought to see like, I think this is an invitation in the text for the reader or the listener to hear themselves in the grumbly crowd. And we can't put it off quite so easily as like, oh, it's just the Pharisees are always grumbling. Now it's just like regular folks are also grumbling. And so I have to think about like, what makes me grumble and who do I grumble about? And where am I irritated that Jesus seems to be going with somebody that I might not like for whatever reason? Now, Amy, verse 8 is quite a charged verse. I'm curious how the NRSV, what does Zacchaeus say to Jesus in verse 8?
He says, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much."
So when you read it the way the NRSV has it, what do you think Zacchaeus is saying there?
It feels to me like he is making this decision now. Like this is a change.
Yeah.
And maybe in response to this real like sort of outreach from Jesus that he sort of feels a little more inside the circle and is willing to give up half his possessions. And it sounds like he thinks he doesn't think he has defrauded anyone to begin with. Like he's not saying, like if I have defrauded anyone, I will make it right many times over.
Right.
So that I don't take that to be a confession of any kind of wrongdoing on that front.
Yes.
But wasn't your translation not in the future tense?
It was not in the future tense.
And
That's what I wanted to ask you about. It
me.
feels very different. If you read it in the future tense as you're doing, then it does seem like he's making some kind of a confession.
Like he's making a change.
Here and now, I'm going to live my life different.
Yes.
And in some ways, you might read him as acknowledging the grumbliness of the grumblers. Like, they might be kind of right about me. And so I'm going to do different from now on. So the Common English Bible that I'm reading has, I give half my possessions to the poor. If I have cheated anyone, I repay them 4 times as much. So it's in the present tense.
Like something you're already doing. This is an ongoing action.
Exactly. And so I think the most natural way to read the CEB's translation is, this is not just now going to be my practice, but it already has been my practice. I already give away half my stuff. I already repay anyone I defraud 4-fold. And, the Greek actually, the Greek is present tense. And so to get to that future tense, you have to do something like some scholars will call it a futuristic present or present resolve, like a prophetic future almost. which okay, like I think that is okay. But whenever you have to resort to
Why are
things
you
like this is the
working so hard?
futuristic present, I'm just like, let's just read it as the present and like let's see
what happens.
Let's see what happens.
That really changes it.
Do you have thoughts about how it changes it? Like, I'm kind of surprising you because like you were reading the NRSV.
Yeah, I was reading the
what
NRSV.
Does it change?
I mean, what it changes to me is now it feels a little more like, okay, now I'm imagining that the people are still around while he says this, and sort of the fact that Jesus called out to him and the people grumbled has like opened up this moment where like there are people gathered around and he can say, half my possessions I give to the poor. If I've ever defrauded anyone, it's almost sort of like a defense, you know? And that makes it feel like when Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham, more like there is a healing within the community, but not because Zacchaeus was doing anything bad, but because the community ostracized him and shouldn't have.
That is so beautiful, Amy. That is the way that I think I want to read this text, is that the actual brokenness in this text is that you have a Zacchaeus who actually is already living the way he's supposed to. Yes. He's got some money, but he does what John the Baptist said in that sermon back in chapter 3, which is, don't take more than you're supposed to from people. And so he is already living out the Torah. He's repaying people, but people have ostracized him anyway because he's a tax collector, because he belongs to this certain class, because he's wealthy or whatever. Yeah. And so they have assumed he must be a sinner. And so the brokenness is in the community, not with Zacchaeus.
Right.
And so when he says that, and then Jesus says, now here we're restoring the community.
Yes.
He's restoring the children of Abraham to one another. Like Zacchaeus is being restored to his community. That's the salvation that has happened here.
Yeah.
I don't know which way to settle that future present debate, but I think each of them offers such an interesting thing. One is about examining yourself in the way that you exercise wealth and how well you treat your community. And the other is about the community thinking about how do we ostracize people based on categories that we have for them that may not be true about them. And both of those things in some way are necessary for the community to be fully restored.
Yes.
By the way, in terms of the restitution, there is a statement in Exodus 22 that you should restore fourfold any stolen sheep. You should restore fourfold to the person you stole them from. Leviticus and Numbers say if you defraud someone, you should pay them back what you defrauded them of plus 20%. And so what Zacchaeus is offering to do here is like the maximum, like the most strict, like the harshest interpretation of the law. High standard, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
For himself. So he's not just like trying to just barely get by. All right, Amy, we have 3 really interesting texts today. There's a lot one can talk about. I'm curious where you're finding yourself in this text and how it's speaking to you about our current world.
You know, it's so interesting. As our conversation has evolved, I keep like writing down another thing that I'm like, oh, no, this is the thing. Oh, no, this is the thing. And the thing that sort of feels most alive for me right now, unsurprisingly, is what is sort of where we ended, which is this question of what in these stories Jesus's presence that we can extrapolate into different kind of contexts, but what Jesus's presence seems to activate in an individual or in a community, that it sort of opens up space for something to happen that's not just, it's not this sort of passive receiving of, you know, Jesus with his magic wand, like fixing things. And, you know, if that were the case, I feel like it is all the more difficult to imagine how communities will continue when Jesus is not there among them.
Yeah.
But if we can take from these stories examples of Jesus opening up a space for reconciliation between Zacchaeus and the community who has judged him, or opening up space for this blind man on the side of the road to really sort of like passionately claim what he longs for, like, and claim that he believes it's possible in a way that, in both cases, these guys are not quite following social norms.
Right.
And there's healing that comes in both of those situations, but it requires us to be be a little weird, to sort of like do things that are outside social expectation. And I think that's a really interesting way to think about the power of like being in the presence of holiness, or being in the presence of holy community, that you believe strongly enough that something else is possible.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to follow the rules of the existing system to the letter, because something else is possible, and you can sort of lean that way instead.
I love that.
That's what I'm thinking about, Bobby. What are you thinking about?
That's beautiful, Amy. I think my natural thoughts, I think, are to say yes, what Amy said. Like, I think that's so beautiful. This idea is just percolating in my brain, and so I'm not quite sure.
I love a fresh cup of Bobby's brain.
that was kind of weird.
Is that
weird? Okay. Yeah. So if you read these two stories together, like you're doing, which I really like, because I often have read the Zacchaeus story just as itself.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got this first story that is about a person who is physically blind, but is able to perceive.
Mm-hmm.
And really before that, we had disciples who were not able to perceive. And so I've been thinking about like, who's not perceiving, like who needs to see in that last text? Zacchaeus climbs the tree to see Jesus. Jesus sees Zacchaeus in the tree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you follow the interpretation that we were just landing on, it's the crowd that needed to see.
Yeah.
The crowd was looking at Zacchaeus, and they were perceiving him in one kind of a way, which is not really who Zacchaeus is. And so the crowd that has been making assumptions about people based on their outer appearances has been blinded to the reality of that person. And so then when you read it that way, and it says everyone was grumbling about him, then the invitation is to include ourselves in that grumbling, and to say, we too miss-see Zacchaeus, and then to ask, like, who else do we miss-see? Who are we misunderstanding? Who actually is part of our community that we can't recognize as such? And so where is the healing that needs to happen to restore? Here it's restore the sons of Abraham, but we could think, in my context, about restore the followers of Jesus, or the people of the world, or something like that, people of good will and good faith. And so then that puts us back in the position of the blind man in the previous text, which is we are not able to see. Maybe we once could see, but now we can't. And so when Jesus asks us, what do you want? To be able to recognize that we can't see and ask to be able to see, instead of all these other things that we might want, it's help me perceive the world rightly, or help me perceive my neighbor the way you perceive them, or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
I haven't quite landed that plane yet, but I think it has some potential.
I love that.
All right, Amy. Well, next week we are beginning the Passion narrative, properly speaking, with the Palm Sunday text, which ironically in Luke doesn't have any palms in it. So I don't know what, we're just going to have to call it Clothing Sunday or something like that, which is in Luke 19, 29 to 44. I'll look forward to talking with you about that text.
That sounds great. I will see you next time, Bobby.
All right, Amy. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Join us again next time when we'll discuss Luke 19, 29 to 44, the story of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Until then, keep on digging.